All statements and opinions expressed by guests of this podcast are not representative of the Orthochat, its host, or its producers, and should not be associated with the podcast unless explicitly stated by the host.
You are listening to the Orthochat by Yanni Katsadas.
Σιγαργατάκησε όλος τη αμαρτία και παρεδόθης τελείως τη ραθυμία της εξαναστήσης σε κείμενο.
Κύριε Ιησού Χριστέ ελέησον με, 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 Κύριε Ιησού Χριστέ ελέησον με.
Greetings in Christ, brothers and sisters. Welcome to episode 48 of the Orthochat. We are here today with Father Gregory Joyce. Father, how are you?
I'm great. Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Glory be to God. Father, would you like to start us off with prayer?
Yeah, let's do that. O heavenly King, comforter, spirit of truth, who whatever are present and fill us to all things, treasury of good things and giver of life, come and dwell in us and cleanse us of all impurity and save our souls, O good one.
Amen. Father, before we get started, how are you? How are things?
Oh, good. Busy, but busy is kind of standard operating procedure, so nothing wrong with that. Lots of exciting stuff happening in the parish and the diocese and pastoral school, so it's all good. And yeah, it's really good. I love fall, so I'm just in a good place, I guess. At least today, at least for now. We'll see what happens in the next few minutes.
Yeah. Well, busy hands are sinless hands, and we're finally back from Greece, and we're back in the comfort of fast internet and quick Amazon shipments. So I'm happy to be back in the States, and God willingly, things are chugging along in a positive and momentum-driven way. So.
Good.
Before we get to anything else, I want to talk about at least the beginning of your story. What was your young life like, and what about it made you care about God and the church?
Yeah, so I grew up in a relatively rural area, very, very small city in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan called Houghton. It's a university town, and that's why we lived there. My dad was a professor at Michigan Technological University. It was a great upbringing, really beautiful. I mean, as I said, we lived in a small city, but within a few minutes, I could be out in nature. And I was occupied mostly with sports, I would say. Did a lot of team sports, really enjoyed that. In that kind of climate, either you embrace the winter or you leave. I mean, literally, those are your two choices. And we really embraced the winter. So I played hockey and really enjoyed that. And I was a goalie. And it's interesting, talking with other Russian Orthodox priests, especially in Russia, we find not a small number of them were hockey goalies. So
Yep.
there's something going on there. I don't know the exact connection, but there's something happening. And yeah, but it was a great upbringing. And like I said, I had a lot of access to nature, which was really nice. In the fall, I generally spent the fall hunting. We did a lot of fishing. So it was just I think a really nice upbringing, real low crime rate. And it was very easy kind of to touch God's creation. And I think that probably had a decent impact on me. I was baptized as an infant in the Orthodox Church, but like many cradle Orthodox, I'm a convert as well in a way, because that really grew over time, and especially when I got to university. So in any case, that's the sort of short history. Great upbringing, not a complaint in the world. So I was, but I do think that real easy access to nature and opportunity to tap into that certainly must have had some influence on me, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think the right word for it all would just be enriching. What did you used to hunt?
So I really liked kind of upland hunting, partridge, rabbits, some other birds like that, and there's this kind called woodcock, which is even smaller than a partridge. They are there. A lot of them are there, and then also some waterfowl hunting. I was never really big into like deer hunting. Tried it a little bit, it just didn't kind of stick. But that other hunting where you go for long walks in the woods, you wait for the birds to flush. That was really, yeah, really enjoyed that. A lot of nice fall afternoons were spent that way. I didn't play a fall sport, played every other season. My fall sport was hunting, and I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, my grandfather was really big into pheasant hunting, and a lot of the in Greece, a lot of people they set up these hunting clubs, and they'll release dogs into
Mhm.
the mountain. They'll go get rabbits and such, and it's
Mhm.
it's really nice. But it's that access to nature, and that access to, I guess, getting your body moving, being outside. I think there's something spiritually significant to that in some way.
For sure. I mean, a lot of the fathers talk about how, if you want to begin to know God, then you should just take a long walk in a field and contemplate how did this field come about. And yeah, so I think that all of that time I was not doing that, consciously in that regard, but I'm sure it had a big impact on my future spiritual development.
For sure. And at what point did you feel your calling to the priesthood? And was it something that you internalized immediately, or did you kind of let it simmer for a little bit?
So I went to University of Michigan, and where I grew up, it was not easy access to an Orthodox church. But when it came to Ann Arbor, there was easy access to a church, and that of course, had a big impact on me. I had the opportunity to more consistently participate in the life of the church, especially the divine services, and that became a real big part of my life at university. And I was applying to the School of Education at the University of Michigan, and I needed some teachers to provide me with letters of support, references, and so I asked our priest, Father Paul Karras, because he was a public school teacher, if he would mind doing that for me. And when I asked him, he said, "Well, if you want to be a teacher, then you should just be a priest." And I just laughed in his face because it was something I never thought of. It just completely outside of my thought process. But that clearly planted a seed. And over the course of the next couple of years, it became obvious that I needed to go to seminary. Now, what was going to come of that, I had no idea. And I think that that's probably the best way. I'm not saying that I was like very wise. I don't think that I was, but I think that that's probably the best way that we do these things is we sort of prepare ourselves and then let the Lord show where it is that we need to work, or if He needs to use us or whatever. And so I decided to go to seminary, and because I wanted to be able um, to be able to hear confessions in Russian, to be able to have a parish where there were Russian speaking people. So, and our parish in Ann Arbor is part of the Russian Orthodox Church outside of Russia. Even though I had taken quite a bit of Russian and I took more before I went to seminary, I was not fluent by any means, but nonetheless, I thought that that would be best. If I wasn't forced to do that, I'd probably never do that, which is kind of a consistent story of my life. And so, but I guess, if you know yourself, you know everything, or at least some things. And so I decided that I would go there, and I'm so glad that I did that. Yeah, that was definitely the right choice, looking back, and I'm very thankful for that.
Right. And what was your time in seminary like? And were there any positive experiences there, or I guess just kind of the energy of the place that still stick with you positively?
Oh yeah, I mean it was all positive. I'm sure, of course, there were struggles, but I think everything was really positive. And I think that okay, the what you studied was really interesting, but what was happening outside the classroom was where a lot more of the education took place, right? So the nice thing about Holy Trinity Seminary in Jordanville is that it's attached to a working monastery. And that's why it even exists. The whole point of beginning the seminary was to prepare the next generation of higher monks to be able to serve the monastery. And then, some of the local guys who weren't necessarily interested in becoming monks but would like to become priests joined in. And this is how it all came about. So very organically in that way. So yeah, I think that being able to interact with the monastic brotherhood and also some of the priests who were there to teach, or the retired priests who were there, kind of living in the area. That was really probably the most important part. I don't want to downplay at all the education piece, but certainly that other part was the great bonus of being able to have examples. It's really good to read about stuff in books, but the most traditional Orthodox way that we learn is from our fathers, and we had the opportunity to be exposed, to really like authentic fathers there, and that was a really great blessing for us.
Right. You know, the
And when I say, I'm sorry, go ahead.
oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. My bad.
And when I say us, I had the more unusual path of I went to seminary already married, and there is married housing there. It didn't work out that we were able to utilize any of that, and that's fine. Now there's more married housing. Now that there's a master's program, at that time there wasn't. But yeah, I went as a married person, and of course that made my experience different. But I mean, I couldn't compare. I can compare it, I guess, to my other classmates who weren't yet married. But that was a little different than the way a lot of students get to go to seminary there.
Right. You know, I think it's needless to say that going into seminary married certainly has its own extra responsibilities and extra challenges that come with it, but it also gives you, I would think, another avenue of support during what for a lot of people, especially people who are priests now, might be one of the most spiritually strenuous parts of your life. Because I mean, you're getting tempted in a different way when you're up there. You're
Oh
getting
yeah, of course.
challenged. Yeah. So,
There's a lot of temptations for sure. Marriage also has a lot of temptations, but it's. I mean, I'm very glad that it worked that way. It was great, and it was also a school for my wife. Like she had the opportunity also to be exposed to all of that. And I think that was really positive for her and has been very helpful in her ministry as a priest's wife going forward.
right. And the thing about Jordanville and the Holy Trinity Monastery is that a lot of people, especially new converts to the church, hear about it in kind of this abstract mystical way, and it's one of those seminaries that there's a lot of positive things being said about it, but nobody really knows a ton of what goes on there because it seems like otherworldly in a lot of ways. But I did notice that you were a part of the clerical staff there. I wanted you to tell us a little bit about that and how that experience might
Sure.
have changed you.
Sure, no, it was great, and I would never give those days back. All of those years that we were there, it was absolutely wonderful. And it's true that probably over the course of time, Jordanville has been less into the marketing part, but you know what? That's okay. I think that it is a gem. And it's a wonderful place to be educated, and especially because of that authentic spiritual life that's being lived right in parallel. The seminarians participate in the monastic services. Yeah, yeah, not all, but they have the opportunity to do that, and it's just wonderful. So, yeah, from that point of view, maybe we haven't marketed it quite as well, but it's certainly the opportunity to go there is something that really folks should look at. And now it's not a question of language like it used to be. That was a sort of hurdle. That's not an issue anymore. The instruction is in all in English now, and so that really shouldn't be a hurdle for any of our convert folks here in the States. So as being a married person, it made sense that relatively early on in the process that I would be ordained. Now, the precipitating event that sort of caused that is that the priest here who in Ann Arbor, where I later became the rector, but where I had come from also, he had a pretty bad cardiac situation that happened, and he lived for quite a few years after that. But this was all, God's providence, and unquestionably. And so, Archbishop Lippi called up the Archbishop Loris and said, "Okay, like, this priest is very sick. Uh, Father Gregory, or the seminarian there, we need to start moving him forward so that if he dies, we have somebody to replace him." Okay, it's very practical, and very wise. And it also got me a ton of opportunity to serve and to learn the services. And that was maybe the best part. That and I'm not downplaying the education part at all, but like that and The people who were outside the classroom were the parts, at least the sort of huge bonus parts. So the opportunity to serve regularly was great. And so I was relatively early on ordained a deacon. That was on St. George. Wait, that's my priest one. It was on August 21st, 1994. Yeah, 94. Yeah, this year is 30 years. So, and that's the day that Archbishop Vitaly Maximenko died. That's the reason I know that is because when I sat down with Archbishop Loris and he said, okay, we need to start moving forward. We chose the date. He's like, oh, that's when Archbishop Vitaly died. Okay. So anyway, that's like Orthodox trivia. You're definitely going to win if you know that. So I was ordained a deacon then, and continued my studies. And then that next spring, so it would have been 95, St. George, I was ordained a priest. And so for almost 2 years, I had the opportunity to participate in the divine service schedule there in Jordanville, which was every day, divine liturgy, and every afternoon, vespers and matins, of course, vigil on the weekends and feasts. And as one of the young guys, I was essentially assigned at least once a week. Now, as a deacon, at first maybe not, but then one of the priests, one of the old priests who had retired and was serving there regularly, but was starting to get a little confused, not like lost, but a little confused.
Just
And
age, yeah.
yeah, it started to be the practice that I was assigned to him. So when he would serve, I was assigned. And actually, that was great because that way I had to not just know what I was doing as a deacon, I also had to know what the priest was doing. So by the time I became a priest some months later, then that really had helped to prepare me. So I'm very thankful for that. And I assume that that's why Father Roman did that he assigned me to Father Vasily, but it was great to have that opportunity and serve. So I got to serve a lot, and thank God for that. And then as a priest, I was assigned generally once a week. So the way that it works is we were assigned once a week on a weekday, and then if there was a feast, it was essentially the expectation that you would serve, and everybody served on Sunday. So I got this chance to serve a lot, and I got a chance to be with a lot of very experienced priests and to do the full monastic cycle of services. So that was all great. So it was a great opportunity for me, and it made it possible really to when transitioning to the parish, when it comes time to serve a weekday liturgy or somebody dies and you want to serve liturgy before the funeral, like thank God I had that opportunity because it makes these things not terribly stressful having had those experiences. Yeah, so I'm super thankful for the way that it went. It's not the way that we ever would have like planned it, but clearly I think it was providential, and so I'm really thankful for that.
Right. And, it seems in a lot of ways that even though your education seemed fast-paced, that everything kind of fell right into place to prepare you for where you are now.
Yeah, I think so. And like it's what we say with those who come to the church. Like everything that came before is not evil. It brought you to the church. So there must be some good there. And so yeah, I think this is all good and it's interesting because for various circumstances based on, the health of the priest here in Ann Arbor, I needed to leave before I finished. That was okay. We got to be there for 4 years, one more year, but anyway, it just never happened that way. And thank God for that. Later on, I was able to get advanced theological education, and I'm thankful for that. So like it all works out. But I'm very thankful for the 4 incredible years that I had in Jordanville as a seminarian, and yeah, I would never give those back for anything.
So, where are you, I guess, now in your pastoral work? And are there any developments or ambitions that are going to change things in your operations in the future?
I mean, my ambition is mostly to make it through today, and then we'll see what happens tomorrow. I mean, I don't mean to be cute about that, but like
No, sir, I get
a
it.
long
Yeah.
time a long time ago, I stopped trying to worry too much about that because that's the only way that you can live with any peace in your life, I think, as a priest. Thank God we have a very active parish. We have a great second priest here. Father Colin Bauer, I know you've interviewed him. I'm sure that his interview is like the best performing
Love
podcast we've ever
him.
had.
He's awesome.
Yeah, super. I'm so glad that he's here to help us. And it's really nice for us in that regard too, because we have like the old guy who hypothetically should know something because he has some gray hair. Whether that's really true or not, we'll see. And then you have the young guy who's having children, and like it just provides for a lot of life in the parish. So thank God for that. We have a nice mix of older folks and younger folks. A few years ago, we developed part of our land into a cemetery. That's great. That was the first step in our sort of building plans. The second step was to build a school. The school is now open and educating children. We had been kind of working by hook and by crook for the last 2 years, a little bit in the church, a little bit at home, a little bit online, but now everyone can be together in the school, so that's awesome. And thank God, about 10 days ago, our local governing authority approved our final building plans for a new church, and God willing, we'll be breaking ground for that church right after Pascha next year. So there's a lot going on. As with all Orthodox churches in North America, we've experienced a good shot of converts coming into the church. I was talking with Matthew Naney, who's the head of the Orthodox Studies Institute, about this the other day, and the best data seems to show that we have about a 60% uptick in converts over the last 3 years, and his latest survey of clergy shows that that's not slowing down. So we felt that here as well. I think that there's more in the south, certainly, and less in the north, but nonetheless, we felt that, and that's been great. We have a lot of young families, we have a lot of new young people, and that's really exciting. So yeah, thank God it's an active parish, and we're able to serve pretty regularly, and I think that, at least for me, that's the key piece. Like, all the rest is all comes from that. So in addition to our Saturday night and Sunday services, we generally serve liturgy every Wednesday. Then if there's a feast that week, we'll also serve that. We want to get to every Saturday. We haven't quite gotten that between me and Father Colin. When we had a third priest, Father Dmitry Mikhailov, was with us as he was finishing his PhD at University of Michigan. Then we were able to do every Saturday too. That was really good, and I think that is some of the secret sauce to helping people come to the church, because they can come to the service on Saturday, but they could still be involved in their present church if they're kind of just getting their toe wet. So I think that that's really important, and we're trying to work towards doing that. So yeah, just like a lot of interesting and exciting stuff, despite the rector here at this parish.
Glory be to God. And something else that you're interested in, probably what a lot of people might know you best for, is being the dean of the Patristic School of Theology. And I wanted you to talk about maybe some of the responsibilities you attend to as the dean of the Patristic School, and why someone might be interested in joining this program.
Yeah, sure, no problem. So this is the 20th year of the Pastoral School of the Diocese of Chicago in Mid-America. 20 years ago, it began with 17 students. This last year, we had 100, so thank God for that. I can say that, as with our parish here in Ann Arbor, I just had the blessing to inherit something that was already up and running and functioning very well, and my most important job has been not to break it. That's true of this parish, that's true of the pastoral school. Pastoral school was founded by Father Martin Swanson, who had been Chancellor of University of St. Louis, so he was very familiar with higher education. He was very familiar with how to handle especially the academic side, because there's a lot to higher education which is not the academic side, but he really understood that, and so he designed the program and we got it started. Father Martin is probably best known for having begun the St. Basil Parish in St. Louis, Missouri, but most people don't know. He was also a varsity letter winner in football at University of Southern California.
Hmm.
Father Martin's gone on to his reward now, and I'm sure it's a great reward for all the work that he's done. And in any case, over time, it became clear to him that he wasn't going to be able to do this forever, which I think is an important message for us priests. We can't do it forever, so we need to prepare, our successor. And he began to prepare me, and I got, as I mentioned previously, I had the opportunity to get a doctorate in ministry from the Antiochian House of Studies. It was a great experience for me. And slowly but surely, Father Martin stepped back and I stepped forward. And so I've been the dean now for, I actually don't know the number of years. Probably like 10, something like that, maybe a little bit less. In any case, those duties, on one hand, they're a little bit administrative in scope, although I still do teach one class. I started by teaching two classes in the pastoral school. I'm down to one now, and it seems to work out pretty well. But a lot of it is making sure that things flow smoothly, that the instructors are in a good place, everyone's getting their stipends, everyone is getting accepted into the school who applies and is qualified for that, and so on and so forth. And I like all that. It's good. It's very pleasant. I really enjoy the teaching part. Now I'm teaching only pastoral theology. I used to do dogmatic theology also. Those were both great classes, but I just couldn't do it all that. So I'm just doing pastoral, and it's really great. Really enjoy it. So it's a really pleasant part of my ministry, and I'm very thankful to have that opportunity. Now, why would anybody want to participate in the pastoral school? I said a lot of good things about Jordanville, and I will say that the ideal is residential seminary, undoubtedly, unquestionably. If you can do that, you should do that. To whoever wants to serve the church, that's the gold standard. That being said, a lot of our best candidates are not in a position to be able to do that because a lot of young men are not really focused on that during the time when they really should be going to seminary after they finish college, right? There's a lot of other stuff going on. Then maybe they get married, then they have kids, and all of a sudden it may not really be practical to be able to pick yourself up and move your family to a residential seminary for 3 to 4, maybe even 5 years, depending on the program. And so what do? The church, we know from another Orthodox Studies Institute study that came out that we have essentially a deficit each year of priests. Like we have more priests dying and retiring than we can produce with our residential seminaries. So we have to come to some kind of knowledge, understanding about this. Are we going to continue to say it's to be ordained, you need an MDiv? If we are, then we have to start deciding which parishes we are going to close and how quickly. Assuming that that's not really the way that the Orthodox Church is going to progress in this country, on this continent, that we actually are here to spread the Orthodox faith, then we have to figure out another path. Not necessarily that we should say is exactly the same as a residential seminary. As I said, that's the gold standard. But practically speaking, we have to figure out another way to theologically educate more men so that we can have more priests. For instance, in our diocese, when Archbishop Peter came here 21 years ago, there were only a few of us who had any theological education to speak of, and the vast majority of the priests had none. Now, in 20 years, that's flipped 100%. There's just a few who don't, and all the rest do. And the vast majority of those folks were educated in the pastoral school. In my parish, we have 4 clergymen right now. When Father Dimitri is here, we had 5. In any case, I'm the only one who didn't go through the pastoral school. All the rest of those clergymen are in my parish, ordained and serving the church because of the pastoral school. Archbishop Peter has had a really strict rule about, especially priests. I don't think that he's ordained any priest without theological education. A few deacons here and there, but even that he's not that excited about. But he'll make an exception. But for priests, there's no exception. You have to have theological education. So not only have we sort of turned over the ratio of theological educated to not in the diocese, but we've also opened a bunch of new parishes. So when he came, we had about 50 spots, maybe not even. No, we didn't have 50 parishes. We had maybe like 40. And now we're well over 50. In fact, I think we had something like 35. So in any case, we've not only been able to fill the slots that needed to be filled, but we've been able to expand. And so I think something like the pastoral school, something like distance education. In the old days, it was correspondence. They sent you a book, you read the book, they sent you a test, you take the test. Okay, that's fine. But we have now the technology to do something more dynamic and engaging, and that's important. I don't know about you, but I've never been able to do like self-paced education. It just doesn't work for me. I have to be with a group of people, even if it's virtual. And so thank God we've had a lot of success with the pastoral school. And as I said, I don't think that is the only answer. Although after 20 years, we probably do have a pretty good idea of how to do that. We see a lot of other seminaries, both in Russia, Ukraine, and here now in the States. The traditional residential seminaries are starting to dip their toes into this distance education, and that's awesome. And and we wish them well, but we have to figure out something. And actually, I made a presentation to the Assembly of Bishops on Tuesday. Not directly about this, but there were a lot of side conversations about this. So I think it's just a matter of we have to figure out the way that we are going to conquer this continent with the Lord's blessing for Orthodox Christianity. And we're not going to do it with 5 or 6 or 7 or 10 or even 20 functioning seminaries. We have to be able to go beyond that. And it seems to me that the pastoral school is a good model, at least of the first generation of how we can begin to do this.
Right. And if anybody watching this is interested
Hmm.
in the pastoral school of theology and you want to explore the option for yourself, I'm going to leave a link to their website in the description of this video. But Father Gregory, we've been hearing a lot about the deficit of priests in the United States, from the Greeks to Roe Court to the OCA or whatever it may be. But what you're saying is you've seen these online seminary programs kind of mitigate the deficit for this problem that we're dealing with.
For sure. I mean, I think, as was the case, let's say I can speak most cogently to the pre-revolutionary practice in the Russian church. The vast majority of priests did not have a in-person theological education. It was impossible. That just was not possible. Now, even the vast majority probably didn't have much theological education to speak of, but there were very active correspondence programs. And that's how most of the priests who had theological education were educated. And I think that that's the reality in a lot of the Orthodox world today still. So I think we have to, it's, there's this thing in our society about, having the right title or having the right education. And like, I'm all for theological education. I can tell you that in our experience in this diocese, the priests who've been able to get through theological education tend to cause a lot fewer problems than those that don't. That's just the way that it is, and that's
I
always, I
could
guess, been the
imagine.
way. Yeah, so it's a good surrogate uh also for how will someone be able to handle the priesthood. But it's I'm not saying that those who don't have a theological education could never be priests or that they're bad priests. That's not what I mean. What I'm saying is that that's the standard that the Russian Orthodox Church has anyway, that a priest needs to have a theological education. Given that, we have to just look at the reality. The vast majority of our best candidates are in parishes, are married, are stable people, and who have been serving the church. It's just not practical to say, okay, now you pick up your life, drag your kids across the country, go to some place where you're going to have to pay for your education. There's no work for you. You've already established your professional career, and it's just like, it's not reality. So we have to figure out what that reality is. And at least right now, with the present technology, something like distance education is probably could really fill a great need and help us go from worrying about can we actually fill the gaps that we have to how can we expand? Where's the next place where we can start a new parish because we have a few extra priests here that could begin to take over this continent? Because I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's been the ethos of Orthodox Christianity since its beginning, is that we, go forth and teach all nations and baptize them. Well, we need it, not exclusively clergy, but we are going to need at least some clergy to be able to do that. And probably if we had such a problem that we had like extra priests knocking around with nothing to do, that would be a lot better problem for our bishops than how am I going to fill this open spot with the priest who just died.
Oh yeah. And I think making that mission efficient and survivable is a worthy and noble cause. And I think what a lot of what we're talking about has to do with the transformation of education through technology and through the access of personal technological devices. We've seen education change in the past 20 years. Very recently, when we're looking at the quote unquote AI language models, we're seeing people being able to find out things even more accessibly. But concerning even, laity, anywhere from laity to clergy, um, education and learning materials is easier to get a hold of now more than ever, but it's also more fragmented. People are getting different things from different places, and it shifts their perspective on what they know about the Orthodox Church. But In your experience, what part of Orthodoxy generalized do you see people struggle with the most from a knowledge perspective, and why do you think that is?
So if in the fathers, is this in the Desert Fathers or the Philoquodia? I don't remember, it doesn't matter. Um, it's not unusually written that we have two problems in our spiritual lives. The first is we're too soft on ourselves. The second is we want something before it's our time, before it's time to have that. And I think that this is really indicative of our lives now as at least North American people. So it seems to me that we want to get away from the foundational stuff and start building the house before we build the foundation. That's, I think, a generalization I'm pretty comfortable using for our spiritual lives that we have now in North America. And I think we just need to spend more time on the foundation. That's the way the traditionally Orthodox life has been lived. First, you build the foundation, prayer, fasting, divine services, all of these things that are the bedrocks of the church. And then once you have that super strong foundation, then you can begin to build on top of it. But if you build the house on sand, that's what it says in the scriptures. It's going to be gone. And so we really need to focus more on the foundational stuff. That's going to look different in different places. That might look a little bit different, in my parish than it will look in the parish down the road. That's fine. But I think we're just not spending enough time on foundational stuff, and therefore we start building houses and they start falling down. Yeah, so I think that we can sum it up in that way.
Right. And, speaking about foundations, I think it's been the story of Orthodox Christianity from the time of Christ himself, all the way up to now, that there's always going to be more laity than clergy. And, I grew up amongst Greeks in a Greek community, amongst multiple Greek churches, attending monasteries. And, the thing about cradle Orthodox Christians that you see by the time even they're in their 50s or 60s, that they have the praxis down. They understand the divine services, they understand what to do within them, but they don't understand the why so much of what happens. And you see this opposite correlation kind of happen with converts to the faith, where they do all this research and they're very enriched in the why of the faith, but they're still kind of getting the muscle memory down as to the how. So, what do you think is the minimum an average Orthodox Christian should know about the faith? And how does learning more than that help them spiritually?
Yeah, so I think that I'm not sure about a minimum, because that might be different for everyone, but it seems to me that we should at least know the creed and everything in the creed, what it means. That seems to me like that's baseline stuff. Because if you think about it, that's like our fight song, right? Like everybody knows their university fight song, and that's easy to learn and you learn it quickly. Well, we should know the creed that well. And the way that we're going to know it is by being in church and hearing it. Of course, we repeat it every day in our prayers, but the point is we should know the creed and we should know what's in there, not just words, but ideas. So it seems to me that that's a great place for us to start. Again, it's foundational. I think it's foundational. And the stronger we build our foundation of prayer, of fasting, of divine services, of like baseline theological things like what's in the creed, then we can build on top of that. The more we try to build without that, the more we're going to have stuff falling down, or we're going to have like dysfunction. So that's what I would say. Now, the probably the most important thing, if there's one thing that I would say that we need to do, is be in church more often, right? This is like this is the gold standard of how we adopt and take into ourselves organically or Orthodox worldview, phronima. This is how we do that, right? All of that other stuff is secondary. It's not unimportant, but the most important stuff is the divine services. And if you look at those icons on the behind you there on the wall, the vast majority of those people couldn't read a word. They were illiterate, and they became saints. How? Mostly by what they learned in the divine services. And so I think that we vastly underestimate the important theological teaching that happens in the divine services. Now, in our days, everything is very, very focused on the divine liturgy, which is great and fine, and it's by far theologically the most important service. The Eucharist is the core of what we're doing here. But when we're ignoring Vespers and Matins, we're missing a ton of very important information because honestly, divine liturgy, the information there does not change very much from week to week or from day to day. But the evening services, okay, or the morning service, Matins, that's where a lot changes, and that's a lot of important information. On Sundays, it's about the resurrection. It's probably also about a saint. It might be about a feast that we're still celebrating. Like there is huge important information there. And I think that we are going to continue to struggle with with being authentic in our Orthodox Christianity in North America until we make the divine services more a central part of our lives, not just for the clergy. I mean, for the laity, where it should be the exception that people are not going to the evening services rather than the rule. The rule right now is that people don't go to the evening services, and that's a real shame because that's where most of the theological information is imparted, and that's where you're picking up your phronema more than anywhere else. So I think that's another foundational thing that if we can get that fixed, that will go a long way towards making Orthodox Christianity not some invading force in North America, but the home team in North America.
Right. I agree. And, as people attend more of these services, I think particularly a lot of young men, as they participate in the evening services and more divine liturgies, that they will be more clarified and enlightened to approach the clergy. And we talked a little bit about this already, how the gold standard of what somebody should be doing to go be a priest is attending an in-person seminary. But there's a lot of behind the scenes work that goes into making somebody a good priest. And concerning those who want to approach a position in clergy, what should they be learning, and I guess more specifically in their free time, and why?
Yeah, so I would say honestly, the single most important thing you can do if you're interested in becoming a priest is be at the services. Like that is the single most important thing. Sorry to beat the same drum, but that's just the reality of the situation. One of the best parts about being a seminarian in Jordanville was we had divine liturgy every single day. That was just great. Like that was so important. And then, the afternoon services, they were served, Vespers and Matins were served in the afternoon rather than the evening there. The monastic services were in the evening. And so sometimes you had other things that you had to be doing or you had to study, whatever, but it was there. Like you had access to it. You could go anytime. I remember I was in the factory Sofrina, which is the big ecclesiastical factory outside Moscow. And they on the bulletin board it had like make sure to wear your helmet, and this is the human resources, and anyone can be excused and go to church at any time if they ask their supervisor. Like this is how it's supposed to be, like you have the opportunity to go to church, and that's an irreplaceable part of residential seminary, but that can be approximated in parish life by a future seminarian being often at the services. They'll pick up the culture of the clergy. They'll pick up the phronema of the Orthodox Church, the mindset. They'll begin to learn so much from what's being read and sung there, but also by participating in the services, they'll learn. So I think that's the most important thing. I don't think it's a necessarily one book that you read. There are many important ones, but most of that kind of stuff can take place in seminary or in something like the pastoral school. But nothing is more important than being at the divine services. And I think if we can renew that for the laity, for the future clergy, well, we'll have more future clergy. I think that would be like that's the one thing I would say is the most important. And some of it is on us, the priests who are in the parishes. People aren't going to show up if you don't have the services. You got to have them. And then you can have the conversation. Okay, we're having it. Not that many people are coming. Let's try. But you can't say, okay, once 90% of the parish decide we're going to have another liturgy, then I'll serve it. It just can't be that way. It will never happen. So we have to lead, but we also have to empower people to follow by encouraging them.
Right. I agree completely. And kind of going back to what we were talking about, how heavily theological the divine services are. What can people learn from the liturgy and other heavily theological services that they might miss? And why are such services so packed with information? Like, why is it significant that they were developed in such a way?
Yeah, so the divine services were the main way that the truth of the church were imparted to people for centuries, right? We have to remember most people in the history of the world have not been able to read. So they've had to listen, right? Some of those saints on the back wall behind you, they learned the entire Psalter by heart by being at the services. Like, can you imagine that they listened to it so many times that they knew it, even though they couldn't read? So yeah, I think that so there is a lot of theological information in there, but the church also, because the church is a divine human organism, right? Uh, because the Holy Spirit dwells in the church also has a lot of wisdom about pedagogy. How do you teach people things? And so the services, there are certain parts that don't change. Okay, those are probably the parts we're going to want to memorize. Everything from our Father to the Creed, so on and so forth. The parts that do change, okay, we're not going to memorize those parts, but those parts are where we should really be listening very carefully. Okay, that what we sang last week is different than what we sang this week. Why is that different? Like on Sunday, it might have the same content, like themes, but it's slightly in a slightly different way. And the church, again, with the wisdom that God has imparted to it, understands that you learn a lot of things by song, not by reading. Like if you can sing something, you have essentially learned it. And so the church also uses the hymnography to kind of drill into our brains in a different way than just reading a book. And it's more effective. I don't think anyone who's serious about pedagogy would lie. If you really need to learn something, then you turn it into a song. And then when you sit down at the test, you just sing the song to yourself and you're able to recall it. Somehow recalling music is easier for us than recalling something that we read in a book. So why that is, I can't say, but that's unquestionably true. And therefore, the services which are chanted also help us to remember these most important things. How many times do you see a little kid who goes regularly to church on Sunday? He's coming home and he's singing the services. He's singing what he hears there every Sunday. That's exactly the point. We need to be a little bit more like that, probably. So yeah, that's maybe not exactly the question you asked, but that's the one I wanted to answer.
I mean, I think there's something important there that, it's weird because I think a lot of people go to church and, they are praying and they're involved in the divine services through participation in the Eucharist and preparing themselves for something like that. But, when you're doing active listening, when you're paying attention to what's being said, when you're chanting along with the psalter or you're following the words of the priest, I think that's where the greatest breadth of education kind of comes from, where everything is bioefficiently retained within you to remember later on and even apply it to your spiritual life. I think that's kind of the way it works.
Sure. Or if you're like me and maybe you're not so great at listening, you decide, well, I better get into the reading thing because otherwise I'm never going to learn anything. And so that you end up being a priest or something like that. And that does happen. That does happen. So yeah, I think that overall, we as Orthodox Christians in North America, and maybe Orthodox Christians in the world, I don't know, we are undervaluing and underutilizing the source of knowledge and wisdom that is in the divine services. And if we could rearrange our lives in some way that we participated even one more time during the week, if we could just touch God one more time in that way between Sunday liturgies, I think that would make a really big difference. And I've seen that in parishioners in our parish. It does make a big difference. If people get a chance to be at the Wednesday liturgy, that really makes a big difference in their lives. We see that mostly in Great Lent, but you can see it outside Great Lent too. But again, it's up to us, clergy, to serve the services if we hope that people will participate in them.
I agree completely. And kind of going back to you personally, in your spiritual life and work, which saints' lives and teachings would you say assist and encourage you the most?
Yeah, I saw that you sent that we were going to talk about that, and I don't know the answer to that because it's a moving target.
Of course.
So I can say that like before I went to seminary, I was very a lot of the books by Father Seraphim Rose, especially the Northern Thebaid, had a really big impression on me. And so I think that it's probably true for me. A lot of the most impactful were probably the lives of the monastic saints, although I'm not a monastic myself. That's probably true recently. A lot of Dorotheus of Gaza. Yeah, so I think probably I'm shallow enough that it's like whatever was the last book I read, that's the one. So I overall maybe St. John of Shanghai and San Francisco had the most impact on my life. Uh, like my family lived in Shanghai, not me, I was born here, but my grandmother was born in China. And so I think we just had a logical connection there with St. John, and they were born in my mom was born in San Francisco, and like so I think for that reason, St. John had a really big impact on me because it was easy for me to identify with him based on the lives of my own family. But yeah, I think that a lot of it is kind of like who's the last one you read. I tend to kind of be always reading at some point the Spiritual Psalter by Saint Ephrem the Syrian, highly recommended. That definitely has an impact on me. So yeah, I wish I was deeper and I could say, yeah, like I had this deep philosophical connection. No, pretty much whoever I just read last is going to have the most impact on me. But, then I hope that also motivates me to read more so that I can learn more.
Yeah, I've been very influenced recently by the Optina elders, specifically Saint Nikon. He's been a great spiritual support for practical advice in day-to-day life. I've noticed he's one of the better saints in that regard, but I think I'm right there with you. I'm very impressionable when it comes to what I consume, and that's why I kind of try to make it coherent throughout as far as, the kind of saints that I'm reading and the stuff they're talking about. So
Yeah, I wish I was more coherent, but yeah, it's definitely kind of the way that I read is like I'm picking away at like 5, 10 books at a time. Just always been the way that I've done that. Speaking of Uptina elders, highly would recommend for folks if they want to like an introduction to the elders, Living Without Hypocrisy. Great book, small chunks, which is really important for us as people living in the 21st century who have the brain span of what not what people had in the past, let's put it that way, our
attention
attention
span of
span
a
I should
fruit
say.
fly. Yeah.
Yeah, something like that. So Living Without Hypocrisy is good in that it's like it's thematic, there's little chunks. That I think is one of the best books that a person could have, because it just provides so much guidance from all of the Eptina elders. I remember when that book was being translated, I kind of would get little chunks of it because the person who translated it, who has for whatever reason decided not to have their name be known, that was in Jordanville, and he would share those things with me. So yeah, it's I think it's a really good book, and I would highly recommend it to folks.
Very, very cool. And just in a general sense, and this is kind of another curveball that probably moves as your life moves. What would you say that you love the most about being a priest and why?
Well, I think what I love the most is that you get to help people. I mean, essentially, that's great. It's not always fun to do a funeral, but you're helping. It's fun to go visit the hospital after a baby's born, and everything in between. It's nice to be able to help people in their spiritual lives, which is the most important, right? Like it's good to help people to be healthy. It's good to help people to be educated. All those things are important, but what's most important, the pearl of great price, is our salvation, right? So that's what a priest essentially is doing. And so that's what I take the most intrinsic joy from. But what gets me up in the morning is I never know what's going to happen. Like I have some ideas. There's a few things on my schedule, but I don't know. And that's exciting to me. Like I get up every day and I'm like, okay, let's get back on the roller coaster and see what happens. And for me, that's important. Like if I did the same thing, if I produced the same widget every day, I mean, if I had to do it, I'd do it. But that's this
It's
is
a
more
bit
fun.
boring, isn't it? Yeah, I know what you
Yeah,
mean.
this is more fun. Like there's a lot of being a priest. It has its ups and downs, but to me, one of the best parts is like you don't know what's going to happen. Somebody's going to be born today. Maybe somebody's going to die today. Maybe somebody's going to call me up and say, "Hey, I've been looking at your services, reading your website. I think I want to come to church." Whatever. Like all of that is exciting, and not knowing exactly what's going to happen, I find that to be inspiring.
Yeah, that's one of my primary motivations going towards the priesthood as well. Mo monotony really just kind of drags me down, and I think I need the. I think in a way, when people look at, I guess from the outside in, obviously, Orthodox Christians don't think of it this way, but from the outside looking in, a lot of people look at, the idea of priest or church as kind of like this repetitive, boring thing, and it that couldn't be farther from the truth. It's like we
Oh
got
yeah,
so much stuff going
it's
on.
not true at all. Actually, the repetitive quote unquote being able to serve the services, that's where you get your strength, your spiritual strength is by being able to serve the services. So like I could not do all the other ancillary priest stuff if it wasn't for the divine services. That's the springboard, that's the strength, that's the grace that allows us to do what we have to do. So it's so far from being boring. It's like drinking from a fresh spring of water, and it allows you to be able to do everything else that you need to do.
I know exactly what you mean. And in your life as a clergyman, what would you consider the most impactful or important moment, and why did it leave such an impression on you?
Yeah, I mean, I wonder what other people, I've never seen what other people say to this question, so I'm going into it completely like without any context from that point of view. So I don't know what's the cool or right thing to say, so I'm just going to say what I think, which is ordination. I mean, that I would say definitely that was extraordinarily impactful for me both times when I became a deacon and especially a priest. And I think when the bishop breaks the lamb, which has already been consecrated and is the body of Christ, and he gives you that peace from the lamb, and says the little prayer about how, receive this. I'm trying to translate it on the fly from Slavonic. Receive this piece of the body of Christ and understand that at the last judgment, you're going to answer for how you took care of that piece that you're entrusted. Like it's very powerful. And I would say that probably of all things had the greatest impact on me. And I think that that's by design. It should be.
It's intimidating, but it it also means everything all at the same time. It's like it's kind of this dichotomy that exists within that. I've heard some people on the podcast that have come on talk about how their ordination was the most important moment, I guess, of their service to the church. And some people couldn't exactly nail it down, but from what I've heard about the first person perspective of that process, I would say that's a solid type in for that answer of what would mean the most and the breadth of all this. So
Good.
um
Yeah, it's hard to explain it, but you let me know that we were going to be talking about that, so I thought about it a little bit, and I think that at least that's my answer. So it's interesting to hear that other people have said similar things.
I should I want to do an episode about the ordination process. I think I'm actually going to do that at some point. That would be very interesting because I don't think a lot of people know much about it. But
I would say of all the sacraments of the church, it's the one that the laity experience the least. Like if you think about it, well, I can only speak to the Russian practice. I don't know what the modern Greek practice is, but in the Russian practice, most ordinations take place at the diocesan cathedral. Not all, but most. There are some parishes where the bishops are okay to ordain people, and some where they aren't. It mostly has to do with just do they like can the choir handle that kind of thing. So most parishioners, most of the laity live their whole lives. Maybe they'll experience one or two ordinations, and that's it. So I think that there's a real dearth of knowledge in that regard, and some more education around that would probably be very welcome.
I will work on that. I will certainly work on that. And in your time as a priest, have you met any, how would you say, particularly saintly or holy individuals, and what impression did they leave on you?
Yeah, so what do they call it in English? Nicetia Citia, the one about everyday saints. That's how they translated that book. Um, that is a good surrogate for the reality of what we experienced in Jordanville in our days. Now that's 30 years ago. Different people now, some of the same, but different people, and the ones that were there then were young. And so anyway, um, yeah, like extraordinarily interesting, unique personalities, but authentically human people. And there are so few authentically human people in our days, right? Everybody's trying to have their social media profile show them in the best possible light. Yeah, that the authenticity that I found there, I think was the most important to me. Uh, so holy people in the sense of being true people, in the sense of being, like truly authentic, a lot there. Most have gone to their reward. A few are still kicking around. But yes, that I would say that that's it. I was not a like some experience out of the blue, somebody that I met on the street or something like that. It was the fathers there, and again, that's just another really good argument for why residential seminary should be our gold standard. Um, and understanding that it's most people will not have that opportunity, but if you do, you should take it because you're going to meet authentic people there.
I agree. I've visited some seminaries and have seen a fraction of kind of what you're talking about, and it certainly seems to be the case. And finally, I wanted to talk about this, which I haven't asked in a while on this show, but I think I think the perspective on this shifts from guest to guest that I've talked to. How has becoming a husband and a father affected your spiritual life, and how has your spirituality guided you in being a husband and a father, kind of vice versa, working there?
Hmm. Yeah, so I think ideally the two inform each other, the husband and father part and the being a priest part. I think that um so I think it's Saint Paisius who says that it's uh the monastic life is the easy one. That it's the married life, it should be the more ascetic. Um, well, there's probably some truth to that. Not that I necessarily live up to that, but I would say that having being a married person with children turns a lot of our life in the church from something hypothetical or abstract into something very real. And I think that's very important because when you have spiritual children, it's one thing. When you have your own children, it's another thing. Um, it it's just the way that we are programmed. I think that it makes you a better um, priest having children and having to shepherd them through life. You become because of that, because of that visceral reality, you become a better priest because of that. So, and I think that's true of being married. I'm not saying that the monastic priests are not good priests. That's not what I mean. But it provides a richness um, in the sort of diversity of struggle that you have to undergo if you're doing it right. Uh, and I think that informs and makes you a better priest because of that. So, yeah, I think that the two help each other. It's not a mistake that most priests end up being married priests and the minority are monastic priests. That's not downplaying monastic life or saying that it's bad. The beauty of Orthodox Christianity is you get to choose, right? You can choose a celibate life or you can choose a married life. And I think that but the married life for a priest is a beautiful uh, and somewhat unique life for sure. But it's definitely, at least for me, it definitely impacted me, and especially having children definitely changed my perspective from something a little bit more abstract to something a little bit more real.
Well, whatever any of our callings may be in this life, may our Lord Jesus Christ and His all holy mother and all the saints carry us through these callings that we may have. Father, I can't thank you enough for coming on. It's been an absolute joy talking to you. Do you have any final thoughts for the audience?
No, I don't think so. Nothing, at least nothing profound. I hope that the people that get a chance to listen and to watch this uh, take something from it that'll be helpful for their salvation. If that's the case, then that'll make me very happy, and I hope it'll be for them something positive.
I'm sure they will. Father, would you like to end us off with a prayer and we could wrap this up?
Sure, let's do that. It is truly me to bless thee, the Theotokos, ever blessed and most blameless and mother of our God, more honorable than the cherubim and beyond compare more glorious than the seraphim, who without corruption gave us birth to God, the word, the very Theotokos, thee do we magnify.
Amen. Father, thank you so much for coming on. Like I said earlier in the episode, I will leave a link to the website for the Pastoral School of Theology in the description of this video. And our next guest is a surprise. I've never said that before, but I have to do some scheduling. And prior to this video coming out, there is an update video on big changes happening to the channel, memberships, church tours, a live stream show with two of the associates of the Orthochat that will be starting a show on the channel. Big, exciting things happening. And until you see any of that, may our Lord Jesus Christ and His All Holy Mother and all the saints be with you all the days of your lives, and we will talk to you all later.
Απολύασος φύση ο Θείος μου Υιός, σιγάρ κατάγγισε όλος τη αμαρτία και παρεδόθης τελείως τη ραθυμία της εξαναστήσης εκείμενο.
Kyrie Iisus Christe eleison, 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 Kyrie Iisus Christe eleison.